Hey everybody, it's Matt from RideHub, and on this episode of Trail Physics, we're going to be looking at the Rollercoaster climb here in Squamish. So Rollercoaster is one of the first blue trails most people will ride in Squamish. Now there's two main sections of the trail. There's the first part that's a little bit flatter and more pedally. The second part of the trail, which is more descent oriented, full of big berms and corners. So a really fun exit. But in between those two sections lies this climb. And it tends to catch a lot of riders off guard. And if you're newer to technical climbing, this climb can be really difficult. So what we're going to go over today are a couple of the common challenges people see on this climb, which apply to just about any technical climb. Then we're going to take you through a couple techniques to help you get up this climb the next time you attempt it. So let's go take a look. So as we're coming down the Rollercoaster trail at the end of the first section, we've just had all this great speed, fun, little exciting section. We come around this corner, and we look up and we've got this pretty punchy and technical climb. Now, while it doesn't look like much on camera, this is actually very punchy uphill, but also what you see is what you get, and the technical bit ends just at the top of this rock. There's three main reasons people tend to struggle with this climb. The first, they don't have a very good line selection. The second, they don't have very good body position. And the third is the timing for which they actually start pedaling really hard to get up this hill. So let's start with the line selection. So as we come around that corner, our eyes come up and we see the obstacle. Now initially, your eyes probably carry yourself up and to the left here, which is where the trail seems to continue. But you do have line options here on the right, up the middle, and then here on the left. So let's talk a little bit about the differences, the advantages and disadvantages of each line. And to do that, we're actually going to back up and take a look at what happens right before. As we come around the corner, you can see that there's rocks and little boulders and roots everywhere. And a lot of this stuff tends to make our mind think we have to really micromanage all of this. And that's before we've even gotten to the technical obstacle. The reality is your bike's gonna roll over most of this. So try not to worry too much about these small rocks here, here, and here. What I'd be thinking more about are these two routes, and specifically when conditions dictate. If it's wet or damp out, there's a very high likelihood these routes are going to be slippery. So I'm probably going to aim to take a line generally up the middle of these two to make sure I can maintain traction with my rear wheel. If I do choose to go right earlier, I have to just be very conscious that my rear wheel gets over this route and doesn't slip on it. So in the conditions today, which are nice and dry, taking the right line earlier here is actually really viable. And I don't have much of a risk of slipping out on this route. Now, as we move a little closer up, we start getting much bigger rocks, and these are the rocks we need to be considering as part of our line selection. Now, taking a look back up at the top, we have our right line here, which almost skirts around this rock obstacle. We have our center line here, which carries up through the middle of the rock. And we have a hard left line that just touches the left side of the rock as it approaches the top. Now again, conditions will sometimes dictate which one of these lines you might want to take. Remembering in very damp conditions, the dirt may actually be a little loose and slippery, but the rock will likely still have really good traction. Rather than just saying, well, that's the line and I'm going to take it, I'm bringing additional conditions into my decision making. What works for you today may not work the next day. Now, it's not that there's any one right particular line, but each line has its advantages and disadvantages. So let's talk about those. Now, a lot of beginner riders will see this main rock obstacle here and say, hey, that's a little too steep for me. I'm going to try to avoid it, and I want to take this right line. And looking at the right line, it is in fact the smoothest way up this rock. One of the disadvantages of this line is it very much involves steering and direction control. If you think about having to pedal up a steep hill and now you're trying to manage your balance and steering, this can actually increase the difficulty a little bit. One other potential disadvantage to this right line is the chance for a pedal strike on this route here. So we need to time our pedal stroke accordingly. Now, while this center line might seem like a good middle ground between the smooth line on the right here and this direct line on the left, the reality is the rock in the center here is very, very punchy up, and then there's a huge amount of chunks missing in the center, which makes guiding the front wheel over it more difficult. So this center line is actually one of the more challenging lines on this climb. And there's also a good chance you might have a pedal strike on the left here while you're going up the middle. So if you're a more advanced rider and you always come through here and clean the right line or the left line, challenge yourself by trying to take the middle line. It's always a good time to work on new skills. So, rider's choice. I tend to choose going more up the left side of the rock because I prefer how direct it is from the point of entry to the point of exit. It also removes any need for me to focus on steering, and I can focus just on pedaling up the climb, which is something I prefer. So once we've chosen our line, now let's focus on our eyes. So I spot my line with my eyes. Once I'm on track, I'm going to take my eyes, snap them up to the top of the trail, and focus on where I want to go, which is the top of the hill. Sometimes looking to the top is all some riders need in order to accomplish this. Try to avoid looking down and micromanaging every little thing you see on the trail. Look up, say that's where you want to go, and get there. So now that we understand the line choice, let's talk about what goes wrong with everybody's body position. So the two things that can go wrong with body position is your body can either be too far forward or your body can be too far back. Now, if your body's too far back, what will tend to happen is the front wheel will start migrating off the trail. We call this looping out. And if the bike starts looping out, the front wheel comes off and you lose your steering. Then you also start falling off the back of the bike. And this is a really bad place to be in because falling off the back of the bike on a climb makes it really difficult for you to plant your feet correctly. There's a good chance you're going to hurt yourself when you fall. If you ride clipped in and you don't get your feet out, you're actually going to land flat on your back. And that sucks. I would always err on the side of having my body too far forward. Now, if I shift my body weight too far forward, there's a chance I might unweight the rear wheel, which can cause a loss of traction. That's going to kill all my momentum, and I'm not going to make it up the hill. If my body weight's too far forward and I have to dismount off the bike, I'm going to be able to do so safely by dismounting to the side instead of falling off the back of the bike. Now, the interesting thing is your body weight can be too far forward when the conditions allow. This rock is really, really grippy. And with the conditions today being nice and dry, there's a good chance even if your body weight is too far forward, that rear tire is still going to grip that rock. So if I had to make a mistake with my body position, I would much prefer to be too far forward. Now let's talk a little bit about seated or standing. If I stand up during this climb, what will tend to happen is my hips will shift forward as a means for me to be able to stand on top of the pedals. By doing so, I do unweight that rear wheel. So I tend to do this climb with my saddle up and seated. So just be conscious, if you do get out of your seat, there's a good chance you're going to move your hips forward. And today, you're going to get away with it. On a day where maybe the conditions are a little more loose or damp or wet, you might find that rear tire slips out. So for the demonstration today, I'm going to stay seated. Now let's talk a little bit about what a good seated climbing position looks like. Now here's your saddle, and it has a big wide spot at the back and then this long pointy nose at the front. We tend to spend most of our time sitting on this back part because that's where it's comfortable. But what we can do is slide our hips forward, resting more on the nose of the saddle. What this does is allows us to actually plant our hips into the saddle so our legs aren't focusing on our balance anymore. They can focus on one thing, which is pedaling our butt up the hill. Now, as I've slid my hips forward on the saddle, I'm also going to hinge more at my hips and bring my chest closer to the bar as the front wheel lifts up the hill. This keeps my center of mass low and close to the bike, and it will help prevent me from looping out. Now there's two different camps when it comes to where your elbows should be on a climb. I'm going to explain why your elbows should be out during a technical climb. By keeping my elbows outwards, I'm able to maintain more leverage over the handlebar, which can help with my steering control and my stability and balance. However, by keeping my elbows out, this is a very engaged position and your deltoids are firing to keep your elbows out. So it's very, very active and can become tiring. The other position is being able to drop your elbows tight. Now, if you think about climbing up a long endurance climb where there's not a lot of technical features, dropping your elbows can be a nice reprieve for your arms, but it can also allow you to pull a little bit more with your hands to keep your body weight forward. So there's advantages and disadvantages of both. But on technical climbs, try to bias yourself towards keeping your elbows outwards. You're going to find it helps improve your stability and balance. Now, staying seated comes at a cost. I'm going to have less power to put out through my legs because I won't be able to use my body weight to help push the pedals down. But that's okay. And this is why we have to focus on the third thing that goes wrong for most people, which is how they approach this climb and their timing. And this is probably the most important part and the biggest reason why people struggle to get up this climb. Now, as you're coming in from the main part of the trail, it's a really fast and flowy section. So a lot of people think, hey, you know what? I'm just going to try to go as fast as possible through this section and carry my momentum around the corner and up the climb. The problem with that thinking is that you actually can't maintain enough momentum through here to get you up the climb. You 100% need to be pedaling. So we're going to turn this upside down, flip it on its head, and take a different approach. What we're going to do instead is, as we're coming down this section of trail, we're going to slow down and get ready for the climb. And while that might seem counterintuitive, I'm going to explain why it's a really good idea. As we're coming down this section of trail, a lot of people seem to forget that there's a climb coming up in front of us. So step one is to remember where the climb happens on this trail. Now that I know that it's going to happen, I'm actually going to apply my brakes, start slowing myself down, and getting myself prepared for the climb. At about this point, I'm going to bring my saddle up. I'm going to start shifting into an easier gear, and I'm going to be prepared for the turn to head up the hill. By slowing down, I'm actually calming down, which is going to allow me to focus on doing the climb correctly. So my seat's up, my gearing is much easier, and as I'm coming around this corner, I'm pedaling quite slowly, even though I'm starting to travel uphill. Now, what we need to do is think about the energy we put into the pedals like a burning match. Think about how a match burns. When you light it, it burns very brightly, and then it dies down to a very dimly lit flame for the remainder. If you think about your ability to put energy into the pedals the same way, you only have a few seconds of actual power that you're going to be able to put in the pedals. People who try to maintain their momentum have a tendency to pedal really hard on this first section of the trail before they've even hit the climb. That's where they're burning their match. So by the time they get up to the rock, they're actually out of gas. And that means you're not getting up the hill. If you instead slow down and calm down, as you approach the hill, you get to the corner, you're still pedaling very calmly. This way, you maintain a calm pedaling cadence until you actually need to burn your match. And you use that power when you need it to get up the technical section of the rock. So as I'm approaching the climb, I'm slowing down, I'm bringing my seat up, I'm shifting into an easier gear, and I'm preparing for my line. As I'm turning the corner, I'm still pedaling with a really calm cadence. The hill starts traveling up at this point, and I'm going to start putting a little bit more power in. And when I get about to this section is where I'm actually going to put the power down. This is where I burn my match. Now, the important thing is I need to burn my match when the rear tire has traction. So in my particular case, I'm going to take this left line. I'm going to ensure I'm in a good forward body position to keep the front wheel on the ground. And then I'm going to burn my match when my rear tire has traction right through this section. Okay, approaching the climb. Slow down. Seat up. Get into my gear. And gas. Remember, by waiting to put the power down, I can focus my energy when I need it. trying to pedal really hard and fast here isn't going to do anything to get you up that hill. And that's it. That's the roller coaster climb here in Squamish. Thanks again for watching this episode of Trail Physics with RideHub. If you like the content you see, please click the like button and subscribe to this channel. It helps us continue delivering this content. Now close your computer, put down your phone, and go ride your bike.